From the headquarters of the Guild of Champions, this is the Chris Terrell Podcast, and I am your host, Chris Terrell, and welcome to another week of your weight loss quest. How did this last week go for you, champion? What new challenges did you encounter? But more importantly, what failure did you go through this last week, and what lesson did you get from that failure? Come on now, don't let a perfectly good failure go by without you getting your lesson. That's your reward for your troubles, by the way. Now, if you're new here, I've lost 125 pounds myself after an entire adulthood of chronic yo-yo dieting. Up, down again, before I finally got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I made some permanent, meaningful, and actual changes to my lifestyle, habit, routines, environment, community, and to my system of belief. Because it's all of those that create me, and it's all of those that I had to change if I wanted to get lasting results in my life. And now I'm here each week helping people like you get the same results in your life, and I could not be more excited to do it. I've been going on years of doing this now, and I feel like I'm only just clearing my throat a little bit. I still have so much I want to tell you and talk about. I'm not even close to being done. Now, if you are not a part of my free Facebook group, I'd like to take a moment and invite you to come join my free Facebook group full of nothing but weight loss warriors that are looking to conquer the weight that has been in their way of the life of their dreams for quite some time. And surrounding yourself with an empowering community might be just the thing that helps you lose those next few pounds. You never know, and it is free after all. You can find a link to that in the show notes or by going to christerrellcoaching.com, where you'll find a link to it there. I also go live every Monday morning on YouTube, and I'd love to invite you to come take a listen to that. I'm leaving that in. And hey, if you like the podcast, you're going to love the live stream on YouTube. It's about 2 hours long, hour and a half, 2 hours, where I take questions directly from listeners, and I usually have a topic to talk about to kick off the week for you. And I'd love to see you there on the live stream. Feel free to come on over. If you do join over there, please be sure to say I sent you over there from the podcast. And last, if you are looking for that next level support with the ultimate community full of true champions that are seeking to better their best and to always strive towards the body and life of their dreams, then head on over to theguildofchampions.com and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Now, this week in the podcast, I wanted to talk about emotional eating. Because let's be real, dieting isn't going to fix emotional eating. You can go on keto all day long and it is never going to fix emotional eating because it's a different problem. Keto, I'm not a fan of it, but if you were to do it, that solves excess weight. That's the only problem it solves is excess weight. It doesn't teach you how to be thin. I was going on a bike ride today, blowing off some steam, getting a little exercise in my life. It's a new coping strategy that I've just discovered 5 years ago on my weight loss journey and still to this day use. And while I was riding, I was thinking, I'm really not here to teach you how to lose weight. I actually thought that's what I was here teaching you how to do. But what I'm actually teaching you how to do is to become a thin person. That's what I'm teaching you how to do. I'm trying to serve as the ultimate model for you and to take everything I've learned from everybody else and bring that to you as well. I don't want to help you lose weight because losing weight and gaining it back is the normal thing that people do. So many people just lose weight and gain it back because they didn't address the root cause, the underlying reasons for why the weight was gained in the first place. And if you don't find and address the underlying cause of the weight gain, the diet you're picking might just be a temporary fix. It might be akin to taking aspirin for a headache. Sure, the headache went away, but when the aspirin wears off, the headache comes back because it didn't address the underlying conditions. We're going to ignore the fact that sometimes headaches happen just because they happen. And we're talking about, let's say the headache was caused by something else, right? But emotional eating is the cause of a lot of weight gain for a lot of people. And it's a reason why a lot of diets fail. It's a reason why a lot of people will set off on the journey of losing weight and not make it all the way there. Now, if you've struggled with emotional eating, and again, if you're over 300 pounds, I'm all but certain that the answer is yes, you struggle with emotional eating or drinking. And that is because to become that big, you actually have to work at it. You have to actually eat a lot of food. You have to regularly override your hunger signals and eat more than you need, and you probably didn't move much. Now, some people are very active. I know that. I know a few people in my real life that have struggled with their weight, and they're incredibly active. but they just can't seem to get the emotional eating under control. It's much like drinking, like an alcoholic might be, right? You could be completely fine in every part of your life, but the reason why you're fine in every part of your life is because you're emotionally eating, right? You could be a high functioning emotional eater. That's very normal for people to do, but because it doesn't, I don't know, fuck up your life as much as booze does, it's become more socially acceptable. And this is where, look, I'm about to say something that is going to piss off some people, and I don't care. I think the healthy at every size movement has actually backlashed and has contributed more to the obesity problem. I actually even believe that classifying it as a disease has caused more harm than good. I get why it is. I get why it's classified as a disease. And I used to think I was alone in that. And then I started looking online and started seeing that, in fact, there's a lot of medical professionals that agree that it should not be classified as a disease. I think it's a symptom. I think it should be covered by insurance if people need to get help. Just like mental health, I think it's ridiculous in the in the United States that mental health and obesity isn't treated the same way from an insurance standpoint because our insurance system is ridiculous here in America, and it is not the best healthcare system as a result of that because we can't separate the financial side of it. So I get all that. I get that people wanted to classify it so they could get the help because now it's a disease. But I think it's ridiculous that we went that far because what it started doing is making it where people started saying it was not their fault. It's a disease. I know not everybody thinks that, but there's a lot that do. Trust me, I hear from them in the comment section all the time. I've been hearing it in the comment section of TikTok for a long time. And I don't know, are you one of those people? Did me saying I don't think it should be classified as a disease, did that trigger you? Did that tilt you? If so, I want you just to hear me out for a second. Just listen for a second to what I want to say about this. I know that it causes all sorts of catastrophic health conditions later in life. I know that health conditions could be the reason why you become overweight. I know that. But I want you just to look within you for a moment. I want you to truly look within and ask yourself, am I an emotional eater? Now, you might not know the answer to that. You might think right away, no, I'm not. I did. If you'd have walked up to me before I started losing my weight and said, Chris, are you an emotional eater? I'd be like, I eat my feelings sometimes, but I wouldn't say I have a problem with emotional eating. I don't think I'm an emotional eater. I would not have said that. But as my journey progressed and I learned more about emotional eating and I got some distance between me and the emotional eating tendencies, I began to see that, yeah, I was an emotional eater. And yeah, I did struggle with it. And I want to tell you some of the shared traits that I've observed and that I've read about and studied and learned about from some common traits among those that are emotional eaters. And my hopes are that as I share some of this stuff with you, you might gain a little more clarity on whether you either have been in the past or if you're presently struggling with emotional eating. Now, I'm going to be referencing a book in this episode, and I'll directly quote it a couple times. And if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about here, you can pick up the book by Dr. Howard S. Farkas, Farkas. And the book is titled 8 Keys to End Emotional Eating. It is probably the best book I have ever come across in 5 years on emotional eating. I have not found anything even close to as powerful as this. It's like the person reached into my brain and saw my thoughts and put them in a book. And as I've given this to clients, as we did a book club in the Guild a couple months ago, so many people said, wow, yeah, it's like he knows what I'm going through. So if you think you struggle and if you find this episode interesting, I want you to go ahead and give this book a read. Now, here he says, he has a section here where he talks about the shared traits of emotional eating. And we're going to reference this, and I'll add some other shared traits that I've observed in my own practice of helping people lose weight and keep it off forever. But the first trait that stands out among emotional eaters is the tendency towards binary thinking. This is black and white type of thinking. You know, the people that think this way tend to think of food as good or bad, not based on how it tastes, but in categorical terms that refer to how it will impact weight loss or weight gain. A good food makes you lose weight or not makes you fat. A bad food makes you fat. Health doesn't necessarily come into play with that. Sometimes it does. Sometimes a person that's an emotional eater will even look at it as a moral judgment on the person that's eating it. Like it was a good day because I had salad for lunch. That made it a good day. But if I had dessert after dinner, well, now it was a bad day because I had some dessert, right? And this is that binary black and white thinking. I've definitely observed this with people. When I first start working with one-on-one clients, they will often tell me something like that. I'll say, how was your day today? And they're like, oh, it was a good day. And I'm like, okay, well, what made it a good day? And they're like, oh, I wanted to have some dessert and I didn't have it. I was like, I don't know why that made that a good day. Like that doesn't make it a good or bad day. It just means you didn't have dessert. I'm interested why you felt like you couldn't have the dessert. Now, again, if it's something like, oh, well, it just didn't fit in my calories and I'm going to have some tomorrow. Oh, okay. So you're not depriving yourself. But sometimes it's like, well, I can't have ice cream. I'm not supposed to have dessert because that's what fat people do. It's like, no, that's not true. Skinny people have dessert too. So there's nothing wrong with it. And this is so big to understand. In the beginning of my journey, I decided to choose a belief. And the belief I decided to choose was there are no good foods and there are no bad foods. There's just food. And the reason why I decided to do that is because when I looked at thin people, I noticed they ate all the same foods that fat people ate. They ate all the same stuff. It wasn't any different. Now, the difference is the volume. We're not going to get into that. But when I realized like we're all eating the same stuff, it stands to reason then that it's probably not the food I'm eating that's making me fat. Now, a lot of people want to think that. They're like, no, I can't have carbs. If I have carbs, I get fat. You're wrong, but you can believe that if you want. I'm not talking about you, my celiac people, by the way. I know you can't have it, but that's a health thing. It has nothing to do with weight loss. And so when I decided to make food amoral, it is neither good nor bad. It is just food. I don't want to think of it as fuel. I want to think of it as a tool. When I started to do that, it made it a lot easier for me to relieve the pressure in my mind. Because when I was thinking of foods as good and bad, on limits, or allowed and off limits, the fear of quote unquote slipping up would become very extreme, very extreme. And let me read this part from the book here. Their fear of slipping up on their diet is equally extreme. It's not a one-time lapse, but the start of an unending weight gain. The catastrophic slippery slopes are an ever-present danger. Wow. You know, before I read this book after I'd lost all my weight. Catastrophic slippery slope. The fear of the dreaded slippery slope is real. I mean, real. And it did not go away for me for a long time. And it is still very much there. I'm 5 years into this quest of getting the body and life of my dreams. And the fear of the slippery slope is there. It's way less than it used to be, but it's there. But earlier in the journey, oh my gosh, it was a very big fear. You know, always like it was just on the other side of the door. And so I would get worried if I quote unquote slipped up because it's like, oh no, this is the beginning of the slippery slope. This is the beginning of the end. You know, if I saw the scale go up 3 pounds or 2 pounds or something, I'm like, oh no, look, this is how it starts. You gain 2 pounds and I'm going to gain another 2 pounds and I'm going to gain 10 pounds before you know it and be 300 damn pounds. And, you know, I'd have all that fear running around in my head. But I realized that carrying that fear and worry around with me all the time made success harder. And if I released that fear and that worry and let it go and chose to believe as food is neither good nor bad, it's just food, it became psychologically easier. And you must always prioritize keeping your journey psychologically easy because you've got to do this for the rest of your life. And if it's psychologically challenging, you're going to eventually quit. You're going to eventually give up and stop doing it. And you must weigh the psychological palatability against the effectiveness of anything. Now, emotional eaters often feel a need to restrict the foods they eat, the specific foods. Now, not always that. Some people will want to restrict certain types of eating behaviors, and there's a case to be made for that. But the restriction of foods or specific ingredients like sugar or specific macronutrients like carbs, this comes from a toxic diet mentality that got conditioned into many of us. I know it was conditioned into me, and maybe it was conditioned into you. And remember this quote from Orson Scott Card. We question all our beliefs, except for what we truly believe. And those beliefs will never think to question. And some people, I see them, they are genuinely, truly terrified to eat carbs because somewhere along the line, a person picked up the belief, the false, inaccurate belief that eating carbs creates weight gain. Sometimes people will come up with really good logic for it, like, oh, I have insulin resistance, even though the insulin resistance model and the insulin balance model has been debunked many, many times. People will still latch on to that, and they will subtly self-sabotage themselves. Restriction of food is a sign of an emotional eater. Do you feel the need to restrict certain ingredients or macronutrients? I'm not saying there's not a case to be made for taking a break from a food. That's not what I'm talking about, right? I have had foods where I could tell they had tremendous control over me, and I'm like, this food and I are going to take a break, right? For like a month. I'm not going to cut it out forever because that'd be ridiculous. I'm just going to cut it out for now, and we'll bring it back later under control. So be mindful of this one. Now, this one, the control thing, is a little fuzzy. It's a little difficult because sometimes you're restricting for a good reason, and sometimes you're not. So remember that your intention behind the restriction matters. If you're restricting because you think a food will make you fat just because you had any of it, that's old diet toxic mentality. If you are restricting because you don't believe you will control yourself once you have just a teeny bit and you'll gain all your weight back overnight, no, that's not a good sign, right? That is a fear that has run a little amok in the mind, and you're going to need to work through that. Now, the other thing that emotional eaters try to do is they try to control some feared behavior or emotion that will affect your status with other humans. What? Oh, Chris, that had nothing to do with food. I know. You see, one of the common things I see among emotional eaters is people pleasing. When you want to know one of the telltale signs of people pleasing? Over apologizing. Did you know that appeasing and over apologizing, needless apologies and appeasing is actually a very selfish behavior in many cases? Now, again, you have to look at the motive. Motive behind the activity matters. But if you are just being a people pleaser so that they will like you, that's a very self-centered motive. That is a very selfish motive, right? Now, if you're trying to, because you genuinely want somebody else's life to be good and you don't actually care about how they think of you, that's fine. But a signal that you are a chronic appeaser is, do you over apologize? So you know what? We're going to take a little tangent here and talk about apologies. Because I realize a lot of people have never actually been taught what an appropriate apology is. A lot of people use apologies as a manipulation tactic. Here's a good way to know if you're using apologies as a manipulation. If you lead with it. If you begin with the apology, you're manipulating. Now, I know some of you are like, whoa, you just feel like super called out, like it just stabbed you in the back with a knife. I get it. Because you don't want to think of it that way. Because in your head, you're thinking, no, that's not right. That's not why I do it. But consider this for a moment. Do you say I'm sorry so that they will treat you differently? Okay. Here's how you apologize. First, you acknowledge some sort of thing you did, behavior you exhibited, something you did. You acknowledge it. Next, you acknowledge the effect that it had as a result of it. Hey, I'm sorry I spoke that way. I recognize me speaking this way hurt your feelings. See? Cause, effect. You're recognizing and owning it. Then comes the apology. I am sorry I did that. I apologize. Can you forgive me? And then, if possible, you make amends. Now, understand, you're not owed the forgiveness. They don't have to give it to you, right? Just because you apologize doesn't mean they have to be like, yo, it's okay. We're not little children anymore. The problem is the way we're taught as kids how to apologize isn't actually right. And what ends up happening is it just becomes a manipulation. Look, that person said, I'm sorry. You have to forgive them. No, they don't. And if you apologize to somebody, they don't have to forgive you. So keep that in mind. Those of you, my appeasers, my people pleasers, look out in your life for leading with the apology. Leading with the apology is not correct. That is the incorrect way to apologize, and you're using apologies as a manipulation tactic. And again, I know some of you are not going to like hearing that. Now, the other common thing that I will see among emotional eating is this how to describe it? It's a restriction cycle. They will begin to restrict food, and they will see progress, and they will begin to believe that the restriction is what created it. And then the urge to emotionally eat will arise within the individual. And the individual will try to work through it through all different methods until finally the person caves and have some of the food. And the person will then introduce shame into the equation. They will shame themselves for having caved and not followed their restriction that they did. And they believe that the answer, the lesson, the key takeaway, the failure is that I didn't restrict myself enough. And so the person will then recommit to restriction, and they're chasing something. Do you know what it is this person's chasing? And let me give you a tip. The person will often say after the restriction, oh, I failed. I'm beginning again. I'm starting over. If you find that you're regularly saying starting over, this is another common theme among emotional eaters. You are chasing perfection. You are looking for the perfect run. You go 3-4 weeks, you fall off the bandwagon, and you're just like, oh, I failed. I have to start over because I have to have a perfect run. That is toxic diet mentality. That is a sign that you might be an emotional eater. You need to look into that, because why do you need the perfection? You don't. How do I start every episode of the podcast? I begin by saying, what new challenges did you encounter? And what failure did you go through? But more importantly, what lesson did you extract from that failure? You see, when you're an emotional eater, failure is often not looked at as an opportunity for growth. It is looked at as a sign that you suck and that you're not good enough. And therefore, the person will cave and give in, because when they feel that, they add shame to the mix. And so when you're on your journey and you decide, I'm going to stop emotionally eating, you are going to find those times when you would normally turn to food. Now, at first, you will notice the subtle ones, the little things that you don't turn to food on. You're driving home and had a little road rage, right? That would turn you food, but you didn't even know there was a connection there, right? Maybe you have this stressful staff meeting you do every Monday, and so you emotionally eat afterwards at lunch as a result, because it's a really stressful meeting for you, right? But you haven't made that connection. These are the more benign kind of emotional eating. And sometimes you can just brute force your way through those. You just pay attention and then you just sort of stop. Now, I think of these little emotional eats like a pressure cooker. Have you ever seen a pressure cooker like a pressure pot? And it has this little valve on it where if you push it, it goes psh, and it lets out some of the steam. Now, pressure cookers have a safety valve where they won't blow up. But let's assume it didn't. If the pressure built, the pressure cooker is going to explode. And so what is the emotional eating doing? The little tiny emotional eats, it's the equivalent of walking by every so often to the pressure cooker going psh, 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 with your finger, just pushing the pressure relief valve and letting off a teeny bit of steam. Several times a day you walk by, psh, 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 let off a little bit of steam. And so the pressure never truly builds, because every so often you're just letting off a little emotional steam with food. Hey, it is no big deal. It's just a granola bar. No big deal. But it's emotional eating. Now, this one is easy to push through, but what will happen if you're an emotional eater is life will eventually put you in a situation where it takes you to your limit. It actually and truly makes you absolutely fucking miserable. I mean, something inside. You're sadder than you've ever been sad. You're madder than you've ever been. You're I don't know. You're feeling some sort of extremely unpleasant emotion, and everything inside of you will begin trying to urge you to turn to food or to turn to your numbing out activities. This right here is when the real battle begins. And this is why diets don't work, because diets don't address what to do here. Keto doesn't tell you what to do when you are so incredibly sad because a loved one just died. And everything inside of you is trying to justify and explain why it's okay to have food. Oh, I said I was going to get over my emotional eating, but not with this kind of sadness. That would be too much. I can't do it without the food. That's what your inner voice will tell you. The addicted voice, the addicted to the emotional eating voice will tell you. It will bargain with you. It will be like, well, you just do it this time. It'll be okay. I won't make you feel bad for it. Bullshit. And so what you've got to do is be prepared for those moments. You have to be prepared for those moments when everything inside of you is going to beg, plead, borrow, convince, twist, manipulate, whatever is required to get you to go back to the emotional eating. And you can't. Because if you do, you're just delaying you getting over the emotional eating. This isn't something you should wean off of. I know you want to, but you shouldn't. Cold turkey is going to be really good here because you're going to slip up. So let's just shoot for cold turkey, right? Because every time you slip up, we need to unpack that. Every time you slip up in emotional eat, you need to be like, why did I do that? Where did I fall short? How did I let this happen? Not from a standpoint of shaming yourself, but from a standpoint of going, okay, I emotionally ate this time. That means there's a weak point in my strategy, in my system, and I need to shore it up because life's going to come around again. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I know it is going to happen. And it's essential that you're preparing yourself for those moments because I wish life wasn't going to have something horrible happen to you. I really wish I could say that, but I can't. And this is where I got to tell you something that's hard. You're going to have to go through this really hard time and not emotionally eat. And what this is going to mean is some of you, for the first time in your life, you are going to have to sit in your discomfort. You just have to sit in it. Because you're like, well, Chris, I just want to feel better. Look, sometimes you're not supposed to feel better. I know you don't like that sometimes, but sometimes the answer is you're supposed to hurt. When you lose a loved one, for example, you're supposed to grieve. Grieving is a part of the process. And grieving has some pain, has some discomfort, but it's a necessary part of the process of going through grief. And it would be wrong to rob you of it. When you get a shot, it stings, but you need the penicillin or whatever antibiotic you're getting, right? You need it. And so you got to take the pain. The pain is necessary for what is coming. And if you go through life believing that you shouldn't have to be in pain or that you just don't want to tolerate being in pain, you're going to find you're going to just never get over this. This is why on my journey, I discovered the value of doing something that sucks once a day. I needed to become comfortable with willful suffering. Feeling pain when I chose to feel it is very different than pain that was imposed on me. But sometimes life is going to impose pain on you against your will. And you're going to have to learn how to go through it and not emotionally eat. Now, when you're in a calm, good headspace, that is easy to accept. But when you're in the thick of it, when life is actually showing up and life is actually getting for real hard, you may not agree with me so much. In those moments, you might actually believe that the right thing to do would be to eat food. You might, or maybe you don't, and you really want to have it, and so you have to come up with a web of logic to make it okay. I've met people, one of the ways that the web of logic they would concoct to give themselves permission to emotionally eat in these hard moments is they would say, I'm too weak. I know I should be able to do it. If I was a stronger person, I could do it. I'm too weak. The person will literally talk themselves into helplessness. They'll literally say the phrase, I'm too weak. I've got to tell you that your language matters all the time. And when you go around saying, I'm too weak, I'm not strong enough, you are going to will that into existence. You cannot go around telling yourself you're weak. You have to stop. You have to go around telling yourself, I'm strong. This is hard. This is really, really hard. I want to give in, but I also don't want to give in. I want two things at the same time that are diametrically opposed. They don't go together, but I want both. But I can't have both. And so you're going to have to make a choice. Do I emotionally eat or do I not emotionally eat? And one of the things that emotional eaters will do is bargain. They will regularly bargain with themselves for their emotional eating. Watch the bargaining. Watch it. Be on the lookout. When you catch yourself bargaining with yourself to compromise your new goal, that's a sign you are letting the other side take over. There's no negotiation here. When is it okay to emotionally eat? It's not. It's not okay. I know. You're going to do it. You're going to do it sometimes. And you got to be willing to pick yourself up, knock the dust off of yourself, hit it again, learn your lesson, extract that lesson from your failure and keep going. You're going to have to do that. You're going to slip up a lot. I wish you wouldn't, but you're going to. All of us do. No one gets through this unscathed. Everyone gets through this with plenty of failures. But just because you're going to fail doesn't mean you got to give in. Just because you're going to make a mistake doesn't mean you shouldn't try not to make mistakes. And this is sometimes an unfair ask. I get it. I get why some people would want to turn to Ozempic or a Manjaro because it just takes the stuff away for you. You don't have to make it go away. It just goes away. I get it. I get the appeal. I get why some people would want to do weight loss surgery because it takes away the urge to eat temporarily. But neither of these address the actual cause of the emotional eating. Consider this for a moment. You don't ever quit a diet because you don't like it. What you're quitting is your thoughts. You're quitting the rhetoric in your head. You want it to stop. You want you to stop beating yourself up. You want to stop feeling bad. You want something. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on in your mind and you want it to stop. And when if you're an emotional eater and you stop doing it, your emotional eating side is going to come bargain with you to cave again. You can't. You can't. You're going to have to learn how to not turn to food. This is going to require you to get resourceful. I took a lot of showers during that time because I discovered when I showered, it was a good stress reliever. Maybe that works for you. I discovered going on walks helps. So I took a lot of walks. Coincidentally, that helped me lose weight. But I wasn't doing it to lose weight. I was doing it so I wouldn't eat my feelings. You might find that picking up the phone and calling a friend and getting real with them helps. Hey, maybe go on a walk while you do that too. You can do two things. You might find that finding a creative hobby, a creative outlet is a good distraction. I don't know, but you're going to have to get resourceful because you can't emotionally eat, even though life is going to show up occasionally and sucker punch you and do everything it can to get you to go back. It's never okay. If you fail, it's fine to pick yourself up and move forward, but it's never okay to just emotionally eat. There's no justification that makes it okay. And be mindful of you talking yourself into being okay with it. Be mindful of the justifications. Humans are really good at doing that, justifying our problematic behavior. If you've struggled with emotional eating, check out the 8 Keys to End Emotional Eating. It's a great book. I cannot recommend it enough. I've read it several times now. And I reference it regularly with my client work because it's so appropriate to what many of us are dealing with. And it's okay if you struggle with emotional eating. It's not bad. We all have struggles in life. We all have our things that we have to work through. And for you and me, it's food. For other people, it's not. They have their things. For some people, it's alcohol. For some people, it's gambling. For some people, it's sex. For some people, it's drugs. For some people, it's rage. For some people, it's workaholic. For some people, it's video games. It's all sorts of different things. But for us, one of our things is food. Food will never solve your problem. I never found a solution to a life problem in the bottom of a box of Cheez-Its. Never. And yet I still went looking. Of course, I didn't know that's what I was doing. I just thought I was blowing off some steam. Maybe my problems will get better one day. If you want to stop emotional eating, you can't go on a diet to fix it. You have to find and address the reason why you're emotionally eating. And we'll end with the most common trend among emotional eaters. One of the most common trends is one or more critical areas of life are providing dissatisfaction. Maybe it's your romantic life. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your income. Maybe it's your savings. Maybe it's life with your family. Maybe it's your social life. Maybe it's your health. I don't know. But there's probably even multiple areas of your life that you are, in fact, very dissatisfied with, even if you won't admit it. And the reason why you won't admit it is because you numb out. You distract yourself, Maybe you're in a relationship you don't like. And so you come home, rather than dealing with that, you jump right into a video game. And then rather than dealing with it, you say, hey, why don't we go out to eat? And then rather than dealing with it when you get home, hey, why don't we get some dessert and watch a movie? Something we can laugh together with. It feels like you're working on the relationship. Both of you laughing together, watching a TV show, enjoying a bowl of ice cream. But you're not making the relationship better. The problems are still there because you didn't work on them. And this is what emotional eating is. Emotional eating doesn't look like the binges in the movie The Whale. Sure, it can, but that's binge eating disorder. That's on to the other side where it's a disorder. But long before disorder, there's all these other phases that are much more benign in nature. Some of them are very problematic. It feels seemingly against your ability to stop. But if you crack open the hood of your life and you look under it, you'll begin to see that the emotional eating is the effect and not the cause. You'll see that weight gain was the effect caused by emotional eating. And the emotional eating was the effect caused by some sort of stressor in your life. And if you want to get past your weight loss, you have to get past your emotional eating. And to get past your emotional eating, you have to work on the stressor that is compelling you to emotionally eat. And, well, that list is a big list because there's all sorts of different kinds of stressors in life. That's one of the things I try to help people with in the Guild. That's why life coaching is an element of what we do. We help you improve your entire life. Because if your entire life can improve, your desire to emotionally eat will go down. And if your desire to emotionally eat goes down, the excess eating will go down with it, which means when you do lose weight on your diet, you won't gain it back because you're not eating the excess food that is required to gain the weight. Take it seriously, y'all. Take this seriously. This is your life. For some of you, if you don't get this weight under control, you are looking at a prison. You're literally going to create a prison of your body. I see them all the time. A person can't move around the world on their own anymore because they got too big, they got too out of shape. They waited too long, and now to fix it, it is such a major problem. Any little thing can become a major problem if you let it go too long. My previous career is commercial cleaning. And I would have to tell people that, hey, dusting baseboards isn't a special project. You just run a duster on it and knock the dust off. It's no big deal. But if you wait 3 years to do it, that dust turns into a sort of a cake and you have to literally scrape it off. And now what would have been a simple 5-minute task is going to take you 30 minutes. And imagine if you have a 100,000 square foot building and you've not done the baseboards at all for 2 years. Now you've got a massive project to undertake. It's going to be a lot of effort. And it's a lot of effort not because it should have been, but because it was neglected. And some of you aren't taking this seriously. You like to dabble and talk about and think about weight loss. In the meantime, you're just constantly going backwards. Year over year, you're going backwards. and you're not addressing the emotional eating, you're not addressing your life, you're not making it better. If you emotionally eat, go find the reason and address that.